Today we're talking about AI and the future of alternative protein. Let me introduce the speaker for you. Noah Weiss, with a rich background spanning 14 years in AI, data, and machine learning. Noah Weiss is a senior AI consultant with a focus on the alternative protein industry. She's specializing in empowering companies to harness AI for accelerated R&D and enhanced production efficiency. Honored in 2023 as one of the leading women of Israeli food tech, she mentors alternative protein startups through the Good Food Institute and serves on the advisory board of the Modern Agriculture Foundation. Noah Weiss also previously founded the Green Protein AI, which is a pioneering nonprofit initiative with the goal of utilizing machine learning to address critical challenges in plant-based meat production. Committed to fostering diversity in tech, Noah also founded the Israeli community of women in data science and machine learning, creating platform for mentorship and collaboration among women professionals. Please welcome your speaker for tonight's session, Noah Weiss.
Thank you, Serenity. And hi, everyone. I'll start with my favorite question. Yes. Why are you here? I know that some of you I coaxed to be here, and they're just like, you really had no choice. But there are some people here that seem to be here out of their own free will. So how many people here are from alternative proteins? Right, show of hands. OK. How many people are from AI? OK. And do we have students here? OK. Do people, industry professionals? OK. All right. So this also helps me better direct my talk because I talk to people from different backgrounds, and it used to be that when I talked about AI for non-AI people, then I had to first explain why AI is so cool and what can we even do with it. And then ChatGPT came into our lives, and then now it's just, I don't even need to go there. You all know how amazing AI is. Now my job is usually the other way around. People think that AI can solve everything, and then my job is to just be a wet blanket and tell them that actually AI can't help them with that. But it is transforming industries across the board. I'm not going to go too much into it because I imagine you have an idea. But in general, just as a few examples, we have healthcare where AI-based diagnostics can now outdo clinicians, experts in their field, with better accuracy. For example, for spotting cancer on radiology. And we have drug discovery, which is a very fascinating field. With e-commerce, a few examples is fraud prevention. I personally worked for PayPal when I started my career, and I did fraud prevention there. And you could use machine learning in a way that you can't really do with humans, and it's really progressed, pushed the domain forward. Product recommendations. I mean, my Amazon account is sadly an example of just how good you can target someone at recommending exactly what they're actually likely to buy. Manufacturing, where you have predictive maintenance, quality control, it saves a lot of money. Those are all fields where AI is really now an inherent part of them, where they would not exist the way that they exist today without those technologies. But then we have alternative proteins, where it's not really the case. And I say that as someone that does AI and alternative proteins. So I have all of the motive to tell you how transformative it is to the field, but it's unfortunately really not. And then the question is why? And this is the first part where this is really an interactive talk, and I will now like to hear what you think as to the answer to why is alternative protein not a domain where AI has made significant changes so far. Yes?
I think growing muscle cells is just very hard. As someone tries to work out and also.
Okay, that is the best answer. We can just end it here. So yes, growing muscle cells is very hard. I also, I lift. I know I agree. Yes.
I don't, fully agree with the premise. I think a lot of companies either claim they are or are trying to. I don't think they are actually or effectively. My sense is that the data set's either just not robust enough, there's not enough data, it's too messy, it's not well structured. And so I think it's more of an implementation limitation right now.
Okay, so I'll rephrase it and tell me if you got it right. What you're saying is that currently AI is not used in any real way in the alternative protein industry, and that the reason, or no?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't generalize and say across all the cases, but in general, a lot of people claim they're using it, but I don't think it's actually deployed effectively or in a useful way.
And the reason for that, you say, is because the data is not good enough, not centralized enough, not, That's my hypothesis. Okay. I agree. It's the data. We need data. AI needs data. Quite a lot of you raised your hands when I asked if you're AI people, so you know that every machine learning model is trained on domain-relevant data. Just a few examples. We'll breeze through these, but LLM, so you know, ChatGPT, Claude, everything that everyone likes to rave about. GPT-3, which was the first GPT that was really accessible to the non-tech public and very made a revolution in how popular it became. It was trained on 1 trillion words, which is a number that I can't even grasp, really. The GPT-4, the next version, sort of the next version, already trained on 10 trillion words. If we're looking at computer vision, which was kind of the revolution, before we had the LLM revolution, we had computer vision, which was the first domain where deep learning, neural networks really started a jump that was quite amazing. ImageNet was a curated set that was used for a lot of those advances, and that was a curated set of 14 million labeled images. So again, quite a lot. And we don't have that for alternative protein. So when I say that, what do I mean? What's the data that we even need in alternative protein to make such progress? I'll give as an example the extrusion of plant meats. Who here knows what extrusion is? Oh, okay. More people than I expected. Very briefly, for those of you who don't, it's a process. It's part of the manufacturing of plant-based meats. You take plant ingredients and you want to texturize them so they have this fiber and just feel like meat. You do that through extrusion. It's huge. Extruders are huge machines, very expensive. Unfortunately, a bit of a black box, so we don't really understand what's going on there. We'll talk more about that later. But in that example, what I would want if I wanted to model and better predict the process of extrusion, then I would want data about each trial that I ran, with the parameters, what the ingredients I put in there, what temperature, for example, I chose for the extruder, and then what the outcome was, however I choose to quantify it. So that's something I needed. Another example is cultivated meat media. So for cultivated meat, I give it the feed, the media, and the media is very expensive. So a lot of work is being done on creating cheaper media that would still give good outcomes. So for that, I would want to, for every trial, see what was the composition of the media and what the results were. In this case, maybe cell density is something that I'm interested in. Why don't we have it? Again, what are your thoughts? Yes?
I would like to add to the lack of data. It's also that a lot of researchers in the biological fields or chemical fields are just not really that interested in tracking some data that we could already have. So sometimes even during proliferation stage where a lot of cells are oh yeah, I mean we could measure some cell density, but we don't really need that right now. There's also a possibility that you have more sensors or more computer vision process to have a tracking of the cell growth overall. But sometimes a lot of people in this space are not that interested or don't have incentives to do it. So even if we did have it, it would still be very little data. But at this point, it's we're not even getting some data that we could already have, in my opinion.
Okay, so one answer is the people that do the research are just not interested in checking the data. Yes?
I mean, my thing is kind of similar to Beatly. So they also have it. I think it's a lot of unwillingness to share.
A lot of what?
Unwillingness to share within the industry and value too.
Okay, so that's definitely part of it. So I'll expand on that later. Another reason is it's slow to accumulate, unlike other domains. So for example, when I mentioned I worked for PayPal, I looked at transaction data. We would get millions of transactions daily, probably. If I went home for the weekend and then came back on Monday, I would have a few more fresh millions of transactions. That's a lot of data to work on. For alt protein companies, like I mentioned, like for example with extrusion, each trial is so expensive, they are slow, like you don't have that quantity. And if you wanted to generate it just for the sake of the data, it's going to be very expensive to generate. And there is an unwillingness to share because it is the core of the company's IP. So if Beyond Meat wanted to, like Beyond Meat has information, has data about its own experiments and its own formulations. And then in theory, it could share that data, but that is really their secret sauce. So it's not something that most companies can do very easily or at all. So basically, did I bring all of you here just to tell you that okay, we can't really do AI for alternative protein. It was nice to meet you. See you at the next event. No, because I love talking to people about AI and alternative protein, and I'm not going to give up this opportunity so quickly. So I am going to cover 3 ways in which we could use AI for alternative protein. One is embracing small data. So what I mean by that is that you have researchers, fortunately, that have looked into how we could use the little data that we have in alternative protein in ways and some innovative ways to use machine learning to still get some benefit out of it. One way that I find especially interesting is using the active learning for design of experiments. So by design of experiments, who here knows what I mean? Okay, so design of experiments is I'm trying to design a better media, cheaper media for my cultivated meat. I'm gonna what do I even try? I have 10 or 20 parameters that I could change. What's my next trial? How do I plan that? Today, the researchers that work on that, the domain experts, would usually either use domain knowledge or just trial and error, which is pretty close to random, which is not the most efficient way to go about it. And then, yes, especially since we're talking about very expensive trials. Each trial, if you're talking about bioreactors or fermenters, if we're talking about fermentation, the trials could easily be tens or hundreds, thousands of dollars, depending on exactly what scale we're talking. So it's really something that you don't want to just try whatever comes to mind. What's active learning for design of experiments? It's basically building a model that chooses the next sample that it wants to be trained on. It comes by different names. One name or one of the methods used for it is Bayesian optimization. So some of you may have heard of that. And it's not a magic solution. You still need quite a few trials. You need to get some data in to get output that is that could provide good results. But it is better than what they're doing now, and it could save a lot of experiments. We don't know exactly how many or just because it really differs by case. But even if you save just 30% of the experiments, that could be huge, huge, huge savings for alternative protein companies, which are quite cash-strapped. So yes, most useful where experiments are very expensive. So for example, cultivated meat and precision fermentation, which, as I mentioned, it could save them millions of dollars per year easily. Why is this not being used? I have my thoughts. I think we're a bit short on time, so maybe I won't get into it now. But it's mostly around just the people that run those companies and that do the research are just not that familiar with those tools. I think something that could change. Extra credit, where is this used in the AI world? Anybody knows? Yes?
Training models usually costs thousands of dollars.
Yep.
But they don't actually use design of experiments or anything.
I mean, they use Bayesian optimization. So when you, at least some of the places when they train, when they tune the hyperparameters of the models, which is also something that is very, very expensive for the huge models. That's kind of like something that some of the frontier model developers use for that. Okay, second way that we could use AI in alternative proteins, foundation models. You spoiled my surprise here. Come on. Okay, so mystery model won the Nobel Prize recently. What is it?
AlphaFold 2.
Yes, it is AlphaFold. So you seem to know it. It's an AI system developed by Google DeepMind. It predicts the 3D structure of proteins from their amino acid sequences. And it has been heavily used since it was released in drug discovery and biomedical research. They also recently announced and released in some version, AlphaFold 3, which is supposed to predict the structure and interactions of all of life's molecules. I haven't heard of any great strides that have been made so far, but I assume that they're to come. So this is something that is already being used, AlphaFold 2, for designing analog plant proteins for ingredient discovery, basically by using embeddings to enable similarity search. And then instead of looking at a whole bunch of proteins that are just the search space is so vast, you can look at just less candidates and really take those to the lab and check what works better for you. It is currently used in the plant-based sector, and you have a few companies that are built around that technology. Shear is a good example, but it's not mostly. I think there's untapped potential there, both for cultivated meat and precision fermentation uses. And even within the plant-based industry, it's not heavily used. Yeah. Okay. The third part is my favorite, just so you know. Shared data pools. Remember ImageNet? I mentioned it not too long ago. So ImageNet was the curated data set that basically was the stepping stone for a huge revolution in computer vision. It was created by academia and just shared publicly. AI collaboration is founded on shared data. So when you have that data out there and you are able to use it to set benchmarks, and you're able to use it so that researchers, labs, companies from different sides of the world can work on the same thing together and kind of build off of each other with a friendly but healthy competition. Case study, Green Protein AI. I mentioned it earlier, or I think Serenity mentioned it in my bio. Green Protein AI is a nonprofit initiative that I started together with Food System Innovations, where the goal was to solve the extrusion problem. I mentioned it earlier. Basically, every plant-based meat product in the market, except very few, uses extrusion, and it is very expensive, and it is very difficult to predict. And what we wanted to do is to use the available data in order to model the extrusion behavior, like the process, and then help companies, especially startups, just be a lot more efficient with their trials. We failed. The reason we failed is because it's very hard to get the data. I'm not going to go too much into it now because it's not the focus of this talk, but it does seem to be relevant to some people. Some people do, some things that some people do. And basically, that even when we looked at, we were looking to partner with universities and research institutes and basically not-for-profit organizations, but the data was still usually tied up in commercial partnerships and was basically the IP of commercial partners. So it was very hard to get anything that way. Possible formats that we could have for data sharing. So one is just open data sets, as I meant, for example, like ImageNet. Another is consortiums, which is kind of what we try to build with Green Protein AI, is just have partners that share the data amongst themselves, but don't make it public. You can only do that when you don't have direct competition, obviously, because, Beyond Meat is not going to share their recipe data with Impossible Burgers. And then you have commercial partnerships. Maybe you can have specific companies that work together and share their data just like between the two of them in order to benefit both sides. What data do we even need? So we can talk about the core problems in alternative proteins, the ones that are like the sexy problems that everyone knows. So extrusion that I talked about, cultivated meat media, and product recipes, formulations. Those are hard to get data for all of the reasons that I mentioned previously. Then we also have some problems that are not the focus, but could still really help alternative protein companies if you could solve them. If you could build an AI that predicts what they need to know. So one example is ingredient prices. Every alternative protein company would start with lab scale tests and try to build you create a recipe or a formulation and you want to see if it works, but then you also need to know when you scale it up, how much is this going to cost? And there are a lot of questions, like a lot of different factors come into that question, and I'm really not an expert on that. But ingredient prices and how they react to demand, that is something that is hard to predict, and maybe AI could help with that. One example is that beyond when they started, they raised demand for pea protein, or for peas, I guess, so much that they introduced a lot of new farmers started growing peas. So that that meant that the demand caused the price to go down, which was very useful for scaling up. Yeah, so scaling up in general is also a problem because different equipment could mean different things. I mentioned extrusion. Lab scale extruder works differently than a production scale one. How do you solve that? Ideally, you could model that also with AI, but you need the data. It's not clear that, it's not easy to get. There are a few data sets that are available in the cultivated meat world. Some of them are also work in progress. Some of them are being funded by Food System Innovations to be created later. But if that's something that you're interested in, then you can hit me up later about that. And if you have an idea for an open data set that you would like to create and you're looking for some funding, Food System Innovation, that, as I mentioned, I'm on the advisory committee of the AI advisory committee. So we do have some small grants to support people that want to do some such projects. So we'll have a new RFP this year. You're welcome to, yes, take pictures and hit us up. Okay, I talked a lot, as I like to do. Here are the main takeaways that I actually want to leave with. The 3 ways to use AI in alternative protein. 1, erase small data. The second one, utilize foundation models where it's relevant to your work. It not always is, but sometimes. And collaborate and share data where you can, either publicly or privately. These are more general for organizations, industries. This is the slide that I show when I talk to industry people or academics. And maybe it's relevant for some of you, and you can take a look and see if any of this. And there's the question mark, which says if you're not sure, you can come talk to me. I'm always happy to talk about AI and alternative protein, often to people that are trying to get away from me at parties. So it would definitely be better if you would willingly listen. But as individuals, what can you do? Because we have a lot of people here that maybe have the tech skills and are looking for a way to apply them. So the opportunities aren't vast, but some things that I thought about. So again, collecting and processing data for public data sets. Maybe the example that I mentioned on ingredient prices. If that's something you're interested in, we can talk about it more. It's not super defined at the moment, but we can think what's actually needed there. Another one is developing a plug-and-play tool for design of experiments optimization, because the Python libraries that do that are basically out there, but they're not approachable to people that don't do Python, and they're not necessarily formulated in a way that could be applied by people that do fermentation in the real world, where it's not just you don't do one experiment at a time necessarily. Like maybe you need to run a few trials in parallel and stuff like that. So this isn't an easy fit. It requires close work with alternative protein companies to iterate and build something that's really accessible and easily usable for them. It requires product managing skills and on top of tech skills. And I think it will take some time, but if it's something that someone here wants to do, yeah, talk to me. I'd be happy to tell you more about it. And in general, if you have other ideas, so let's talk. We'll hit questions soon and you can share it, or you can talk to me later. Or you could pitch it, the FSI, AIML grants, again. Yeah, that's basically it.